All right, why don't we get started, panel 2. So the topic of this panel is maximizing the use of the International Space Station. The co-moderators are Don Pettit and Inessa Kozlovskaya. Dan Burbanks, who's listed in your program as one of the co-moderators, was delayed at Kennedy Space Center, and he won't be arriving until this afternoon. Therefore, Don, thanks so much for pinch hitting as a co-moderator. Leroy introduced you in the last panel, so I'll forego on that. But by way of introducing Inessa, we all know Inessa and admire her. She's an icon in the field of space biomedical research. An expert and head of her department in sensory motor physiology and countermeasures at the Institute of Biomedical Problems in Moscow. Inessa's laboratory has given rise to seminal findings and fundamental mechanisms, as well as in operationally relevant research and countermeasures, right? And Inessa's an academician of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and she's mentored and collaborated productively with many of us here in the room today. Inessa, we thank you for making the long trip to join us once again at ISMS. So I hand it off to you, Inessa, and to Don. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I got impressed into being a moderator, and so I'm learning my moderator skills on the fly here. And the panelists have changed a number of times since the schedule was printed up. And so I'm going to look at them and see if I can actually introduce them. There's Enza, and then there's Dave Wolf, and former astronaut. There's Koichi Wakata, astronaut. Bonnie Dunbar. Michael Roberts is sitting in for Box Johnson from KSES. And then Oleg Kotov, cosmonaut, is here. And then someone who's sitting in for Bill Pulaski.
Jen Fogarty.
Okay, Jennifer's sitting in for Bill. And then there's Julie Robinson, who's the chief scientist of the space station. So
And we also have, I think, is it Vasily or Boris are going to sit in on the panel? So we'll pull another chair.
Okay, we got Vasily Savinkov from Roscosmos here as well. So we've got a big panel of experts here to talk about the maximizing the use of the International Space Station. And rather than have every panelist go through and say a few words, which will end up taking most of our time, I would like to just start off with audience questions and let the panelists talk about what you folks bring up as questions. And topics, let's start the first topic on sharing the facilities and data. So the idea of maximizing international use of the space station with sharing the facilities and sharing the data. Do we have any questions or comments from the audience right now to get that started? Ooh. How about Julie? Why don't you throw a bomb out there and get the discussion started?
Okay.
I know you're capable of doing that.
Sure, why not? Well, so maybe rather than just throw out a question, let me give just a couple words about how much international collaboration on ISS has changed in the last say 3 to 5 years, because some of you who may not have been involved as closely with the research may not know everything that's happened. So about 5 years ago, the 2 ISS program managers agreed that they needed to have joint research between the US and Russia on the International Space Station. Of course, we already had collaborative research within the other nations through other agreements, but that was the first time we had had high-level programmatic agreement to create and develop joint research together. So during the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to do that, also working with Boris Shishkov and Vasily Savinkov from Roscosmos, who have been working that, and colleagues at SNEMOSH. Oleg has been involved in some of that, and NESA has been involved in some of those joint research development activities. I think we've learned 4 things from the last 5 years about what the challenges are to joint utilization. Of course, the first challenge is the scientists have to agree. They have to want to work together and share their data. The second challenge is that the research has to be approved through peer review processes in both countries, or in trilateral or multilateral agreements, sometimes in as many as 5 countries. The second challenge then is that not only must it get through peer review, but each country has to fund their own investigators through their own processes. So sometimes that funding is not forthcoming in one nation, and that can stop the collaboration in spite of the best intents of all the participants. And then the fourth requirement is then that the programmatic side has to be able to arrange all the resources to actually execute that joint research. So when you hear those 4 steps, you can see why it can be difficult to carry out joint research, but with strong motivations at all those 4 levels, we've also had extraordinary successes. We now do hundreds and hundreds of hours annually in joint research on the International Space Station. And we have done and are continuing to do complex experiments that would never have been possible to do before. One example of that is one that Dr. Kozlovskaya is involved in, the MARES experiment, which is a European facility with American astronauts and Russian cosmonauts operating the equipment together and participating as subjects jointly in an experiment that is incredibly complicated. It takes hundreds of hours to set up and execute the equipment. Another example is that U.S. studies with rodent research, cosmonauts then help to carry out those studies, and the tissues have been exchanged and shared. Professor Suchev, sitting here in the front, has been very involved in making those kinds of research exchanges a reality. And this has also extended into the physical sciences, where cosmonauts operate the American combustion facility, for example, and the data is shared between American and Russian scientists. So in spite of the many frustrations that each individual case has had, we now have a pathway in place that dozens, and I think we're probably over 100 scientists now who have participated in some joint research under this program, many hundreds of crew hours, experiments across all of those different disciplines. It's not easy, because getting your science funded and implemented in space is not easy, and you have to do that. You have to multiply that difficulty by the number of nations that are involved, but it actually has been highly successful.
Thanks, Julie. Any questions brewing out there in this fine group of folks? David, you've certainly got to have a question.
For me?
Yes.
Okay. I have to make one. You're putting me on the spot here. I mean, one of the things that we've been talking about is sort of trying to create a field station, like for biomanufacturing or something on the station. Have you thought about creating a Woods Hole research center, something where scientists can come and and advertise that a bit more broadly in terms of having a set of I mean, I know you have this already, and I'm sort of just responding to the being put on the spot, but basically creating a series of experiments that can broaden the interest. And I understand all the comments, Julie, you make about internet. We're trying to get a partnership between, say, the UK and the US, and there's some various problems in there unless we can get the funding sorted out along those 2 different channels. But do you see, is there a field station option for certain areas that will ultimately lead to the Mars thing, in addition to all the human experiments that we need to perform on station? I don't know if that's a clear question or not, but thanks, Don.
Well, I think what I heard in the question, and I'll hand off to my colleague Mike Roberts, I think, on this one as well, is innovative uses of a multidisciplinary laboratory can be much larger than government alone. And in the U.S., our designation of that is the designation in the Authorization Act of 2010, 11, and now 17 of the U.S. segment as a U.S. national laboratory. And so with that as an introduction, because CASIS is the manager of that laboratory for NASA, let Mike address the rest of your question.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So just by way of introduction, for those of you who may not be familiar with the acronym CASIS, it's the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space. We're a not-for-profit organization that manages the International Space Station National Laboratory. So as Julie mentioned, the idea behind the ISS National Lab is exactly along the lines of what you were talking about. It's an opportunity to engage with commercial industry, with the commercial sector, to engage with other federal agencies in the United States, in addition to NASA, who have active funding portfolios that can benefit from access to the space environment. And in the future, I think it would certainly be a model that could be applied to international collaborations as well. So since Congress declared the U.S. operating segment of the station as a national laboratory in 2005, interest and activity in the national laboratory has increased tremendously. We now have active partnerships with the National Institutes of Health, who are putting significant funding into funding research that is at the heart of that particular NIH institute's portfolio. So the concept of the National Lab is to essentially open up new pathways to space as a research and development environment. And the National Lab is one concept for that. There are certainly other ones out there. It also, I think, and I hope we'll get into the conversation a little bit later, adds to the possibility of a commercial presence providing those services in the space environment. So in the future, there will be free flyer platforms that offer R&D services. There will very likely be modules that are attached to the International Space Station that offer commercial services as well.
Next question here.
Yeah, my question is primarily for Koichi. On behalf of those who are interested in artificial gravity, we know of the plans for JAXA to complete and fly the rodent centrifuge. Tell us how that's going and what we might expect to have returned from that opportunity to look at hypogravity.
Yeah, we have already conducted two series of rodents, like a mice return mission in the past 2 years, last summer and this summer, with the help of SpaceX. And we have a centrifuge rotor and a Japanese module. And we will be launching a larger scale centrifuge, but still it's inside of the JEM module. And that's going to happen next year. And so we will increase the number of test specimens more than double. And so that's the plan. And last summer in August and this summer in August, we have concluded those missions, but it's the comparison between a zero gravity and a one gravity research. And the next mission will involve the comparison between the low hypo G level exposure of the test specimen mice. So we'll see the difference, and this is going to be the first time that we will be recovering those mice alive from the space station with low gravity comparison, and I hope it's going to be successful.
Ted, may I add something?
Of course.
Yes. I think this doesn't work, yes. I would like to add we talk about sharing what we obtained already, and we are talking about sharing the facilities and sharing the data. But I would like to add one substances to this question. It is sharing the experience, because all the discussion which was before us today, it concerned the very important question without solving the problem, we cannot move really forward. It is sharing the experience. Because for me, who represent not the old generation, but the oldest generation of those people who were ensuring the piloted cosmonautic during many, many years. I would like to say that the question about how to combine without deep battle and deep conflict of two sides which always present in every issue. In every issue, there is plus and minus. And in the issue of sharing the experience, it is all the same, because the general cooperative work means to combine, from one side, is wish to cooperate, from the other side, the wish to to compete, and nevertheless, it is not solvable problem, because one more point which I want to put here. We work here, and there was in somebody's, in 2 or 3 presentation, there was discussed the question about bringing young generation, which will maybe solve the problem, but that's not true. Again, we have old generation and young generation working in every problem. And the role of young generation is to try to go forward, and they have to try, because otherwise what for do we need them? They have to go forward. But what about old generation? To keep the experience, to bring to this young generation the knowledge about what was already tried, and what was good and what was not good. And from this point of view, I would like to say that as the oldest one, I just tell you that I know very well what was on Russian side. And on the Russian side, many years ago, in 1970, when even long duration flight didn't start yet, they were just starting. The chief of Russian space program, ingenious man, Professor Gazenko, immediately went forward saying that the piloted program, and Korolev was together with him, that piloted cosmonautic, piloted space, it is cooperative matter. And they not only told so, but they organized very broad international program, which was going for 20 years, from 70 to 98. It means 30 years. And which continue now when we rehab a little bit after our vacation in 90s, and we rehab our program as well. This is a program BION, and everyone who on Russian, but not only on Russian, on American, on French, on Canadian, and other countryside, were doing experiment with this animal. They know BION program. The program was absolutely free for all country participating. It doesn't mean that we supported all the experiment which we are going. The experiment were supported by national agency, but everything, ensuring the flight, lunch, land, providing, and so on and so on, it was free for all country, for all project, and it was going 30 years, and it is going now again. And we didn't have any difficulty. We are such a good friend with all people who flew with us for 30 years. But trying on animal, 10 years later, when in Russia there was developed the human being program flights, immediately the Russian station opened the international program of experiments on the station. And maybe 10 years later, if I would ask this auditorium, because I was there at that time also, who was flying on Mir station this experiment, I will see a lot of hands, because a lot of you, a lot of your colleagues from Canada, from French, from Germany and so on, Austrian, They were flying on our station, and they were doing joint experiment. That's what I want to underline. Not their own, but joint experiment, joint program, and a lot of things we found out from this program. Therefore, and again, what was the main essence? All this program, all this cooperation was not the private. They were governmental. The program on Mir Station, the program on Salute Station, they were intergovernmental договора, agreements, and even our analog. I thought that Vadim will be talking about analog experiment, because a lot of you participated in our Mars 100 experiments. It is 2 years isolation study in our facilities, and so on and so on, and no problem. So the problem is that, of course, there should be developed governmental, intergovernmental agreements and rules. How, and just to finish this, I want to say that at the end of 90s, before the station flight, in America, there was performed this, Vadim, my answer to you. In America, there was performed very big experiment with settlement. And you know what was the end? The end of this very big experiment was battle among participants of this experiment. And they sent for Dr. Gazenko, who was at that moment as old as I am now. He came to tell them how to live together without battles, and give the example, our station, our isolation experiment. And he talked about one thing. He said that in this experiment, people should be joined, should collaborate, who have and live on station together. Because when we started fly on Mir Station from all over the world, everybody would say that people of different nationalities, how will they live together? How they will, they have different religion, different temper, and so on and so on. It turned out no problem. Why? There should be joint aim, joint purpose, joint rules, joint interests, and no problem. Why I decided to take time down, in spite of your warning, you're right. Only that don't let for us not make the objections. And by the way, and you, as a matter of ship, you were the first with whom I was flying on our ship. And I would like to tell you about him. I want to tell you, because that the training device, which today is extremely usable on our station, it is on station only due to him, because during flying the first fly on our joint station, he put attention. He is the man who likes his muscle and likes to take care about it. He remarked that we didn't have decent, nobody of us had decent resistive exercise device, and he insisted like this, that such device should be done, and we did it together, right? That's it. Now it's flying, and it was done by American, but our cosmonaut make, a front to us. They said, we want to make our countermeasure on this device, and they do. So there are no real objective which don't allow us to cooperate. Let us not to imagine them.
Anissa, thanks. And I have to give Shep a chance for a rebuttal here.
Anissa, ja lulu vas. I love you. No, I just wanted to pile on. I just like to ask the panel. I personally think that the compatibility of the crew and getting the crew to work together is probably one of the harder things to do well, and it's going to be a big challenge on long expeditions. I don't know that it is a subject that observes much technical or medical research, but I think it's a very important thing. So I'd like to ask the panel, is that an issue? Is that something that scientists are looking at? And if so, what's being done? How to make a crew cooperative, safe, efficient, effective?
On that specific question, I know most of you don't know me, so I'll do just a brief intro. Jennifer Fogarty, I'm the chief scientist from the Human Research Program that's existed since 2005. It was an outcome of the ending of COJU from headquarters and evolving out of ISS. So our charter is to reduce human system risk for the exploration of space by humans. There is no doubt that behavioral health and performance issues such as team, behavioral health of the individual, is some of our most recognized critical risks to understand for this mission we haven't done yet. And not to diverge too much from the topic of this panel, but ISS isn't the best platform for everything that's going to go to station, right? In terms of field, it's a very dynamic place. You have crew changeover a lot, visiting vehicles. You have access to resupply. You have almost instantaneous communication with the ground, with family. That is a dynamic that won't exist on the autonomous missions to something like Mars. So we often have to take that work out of the space station and put it in an analog to construct the environment, to really understand what are the critical issues about selecting the crew, training the crew together, how to look at the vulnerabilities, how to provide them the things they need to sustain them throughout the mission, even things such as the right level of stimulation. So we use the Human Exploration Research Analog at Johnson Space Center, which is an isolated, confined, and controlled analog. You can do work in Antarctica, which is isolated, confined, and extreme, and they're exploiting different aspects of what people will go through in the totality of a space exploration mission. We have some of our experts in the audience today that can speak to that alone. Dr. Dingus, we have Dr. Tom Williams here, that are really leading the way to try to ferret out what are the characteristics. Are they personality driven? Are they cognitive? Will those be impacted by the stressors you're experiencing during the mission alone? What are the duration of your tolerances for each other? We've all experienced times in your life when you've been stuck with a couple of people under, stressful circumstances, and maybe something that wouldn't have bothered you if you had an alternative suddenly becomes very disruptive to your ability to function. So I think it's highly recognized. We often work interagency. The Department of Defense also has a lot of work in that area for special operations teams.
Let me just add one thing to that. I think it's extremely important not to just focus on the crew, but also the structure of how the organizations on the ground relate to the crew, which I think Expedition 1 found was a big problem. That the expectations of the people on the ground, the cultures and the organizations and the research that they wanted to do wasn't consistent across the program, and this was a huge source of distress for the crew. Had nothing to do with the crew's preparation, the crew's training, whatever. It was simply the relationship between the ground and the crew that was the problem. It had not been worked out well.
Yeah, and I think that has been widely reported and taken into consideration, but the dynamic for exploration mission, you won't have the ground commanding the crew. They will be much more, if not wholly, autonomous. So that is part of what they're trying to understand, that component and how that dynamic is different.
And Bonnie, it looks like you have something to say.
Yeah, I'd like to just follow up on some of Inessa's very good comments about the collaboration that existed on Salyut and Mir leading up to our joint efforts. But also, I know there are many people in this room that were part of the Space Lab flights on the shuttle flights. Larry's up there. 135 flights. I flew 3 of those Space Lab flights, and we had what were called investigator working groups. And that was about how to share data, how to collaborate on crew time. My first mission actually was D1, Deutschland 1, and that was the first crew of 8. That was not managed from ESA, it was managed from DFVLR. We had 5 Americans, 2 Germans, and a Dutchman, 18-month training flow. The investigator working group worked on the research. Larry was part of that from the MIT vestibular systems side of it. We had a number of German experiments and French and Swiss and Italian and UK. So international crew, international research, and it worked out very well. So it can be done. On those 135 flights, that was a model that worked. And I bring that up because part of the discussions we've had in our crew health standing committee comes from crew members that have maybe been away from ISS for more than 5 years and are not as familiar with the new initiatives, but one of their concerns was this lack of collaboration and having to give multiple blood samples for exactly the same test. You know, I've always willingly gave my blood, a lot of you know that, but I only have a limited supply, so I can understand, you know, where there needs to be collaboration, there should be collaboration. But also even understanding that some research outside the biomedical sector is going to be proprietary. We handled that very well on both the shuttle and Space Lab, particularly protein crystal growth, where you had the pharmaceutical industry involved with their intellectual property. So you handle all these cases uniquely, but you work as a team because you want the crew, like Shep was saying, on the ground, you work as a team and collaboratively because you want the crew to echo that behavior in flight as well, so you maximize the data for everyone.
Thanks, Bonnie. Jeff?
Yeah, I want to follow up with Shep. I would say, in my experience and over the last 20 years with ISS, that we've grown through the issues on board. And as you said, the issues on board are not that significant. I would also say that we've grown through the issues of the ground relating to the crew. And we're doing a pretty good job there in terms of once we're implementing a program on board. The biggest challenges I see with this are with the individual bureaucracies on the ground, and then, of course, the integration of those bureaucracies in the international setting. And that's where I think we really need to focus the efforts for the future. And by future, I mean for the rest of the life of ISS and anything we do outside Earth orbit, and I would say probably in the lunar system before Mars. Mars is, in my opinion, way over the horizon. And because of that, the efforts need to be focused on those things, the bureaucracies on the ground, to actually implement a program.
Anyone? Dave?
Can I just put 2 words on Jeff's?
Oh, yeah.
One of the reasons why I brought up the point that I did was that our Expedition 1 was kind of a throwback to really early days of space in terms of the relationship of the crew of the ground, because the lack of complete 24/7 communications. And so we're going to see that again in exploration. The problem was we had cultures on the ground that were used to talking to the space shuttle all the time, and we had 3 and 4 hour passes where we had no comm with the ground, and we get synced up with Houston, and they would send a multitude of, or Moscow would send a multitude of commands up to the station. I'm going like, how do you guys even know what the configuration of the vehicle is now? Because you haven't seen it in 4 years, and here you are blasting away with all these commands. You know, what's the sense of this? This is not good. We can't operate this way. So it's really a look at the problems that we'll see in the future when we don't have instantaneous, constant communications, and that's what worries me.
Quick comment comes out as I listen. perhaps it's a replacement question. Sharing experimental design and doing the work together is a different story, perhaps, than sharing the data after the fact. That there's quite a bit about to be available. Perhaps that could be looked at also.
Yeah, and to spur on that, David, if you have proprietary work going on space station, and we do, and you have data that you're generating, are there going to be issues keeping that proprietary if it's a U.S. company and maybe they have competition in Japan, but there happens to be a Japanese astronaut on station? Will that commercial entity not want a Japanese astronaut to do it? And Julie, maybe you can comment, and Michael, on what we've done currently with proprietary commercial data, and who gets to do the experiment, and how do you keep everybody happy?
Well, the Space Station Code of Conduct and our Utilization Management Plan, which was baselined in the 2000s, actually covered that clearly, and we've never needed to make a revision. So the crew members deliver the data back to the investigator teams and to the ground, and they don't ever share that outside, so they don't need to know. And we have never yet had anyone request a specific nationality of crew member or anything based on proprietary. So I have to say that the sort of the writers of the original intergovernmental agreements, which defined how we would handle proprietary data across all the nations, and then the documents that have flowed down from those have been really solid. We've never needed to revisit.
And Michael, what have you found at cases with paying customers that want to keep their information in a manner that maybe they can make a profit from it, which is what commercialization is all about?
Yeah, so that has not been an issue in execution at all. We have encountered companies who have intellectual property have questions up front about the protection of their intellectual property on the International Space Station, and it's been more directed at language that's in typical NASA contracts than anything to do with the international partners. But having said that, there hasn't been any issue at all. We've had several rodent research experiments sponsored by pharmaceutical companies that have had international partners work on the dissections for those experiments. And there's been international biospecimen sharing programs using what were in some cases mice that were developed or had some intellectual property in them from the pharmaceutical company. So it's a topic of discussion, and as we move forward with the commercialization of the space environment, it might become an issue, but so far a lot of the companies are so excited about the opportunities that are available to them, and they're so focused on the science objectives, there hasn't been any issue at all with crossing the international lines.
And a quick question for Oleg, and this has to do with sharing crew time. How have you seen the sharing of crew time in terms of utilizing a space station to the max between Russian crew members and the USOS crew members?
I try to answer a little bit widely on this question because when we're talking about maximize utilization, ISS is only not sharing the time, only sharing the data. It's mostly the problem is how to organize all this process inside each agency and between agencies, between the partners. So in this way, what is the you're right. What is the currency on station is a crew time, and when we're trying to calculate the cost for each science for experiment, we should understand how much it costs in crew time. And when we share crew time between expedition between all IPs astronauts, they're understanding, so it's not easy, sometimes not easy to do. And what we are going to do in Russia these days, we're trying to reorganize all science program. We're trying to divide to recollect all experiments in 3 big groups. First is the fundamental science, and when the some institutes or universities are very looking forward to use the station as a laboratory to get some science. And second group of experiments is we're talking about some technologist experiments. What's really we need to perform to mark all roadmap with critical technologies if in case we need to reach the moon or Mars or beyond. And third one is a commercial or some not like experiment, or maybe call it like a task. For example, some task from geophysics or some to Earth observation, education. That means it's not in science in clear understanding. It's not experiment and clear understanding. It's just utilization of station. And the question is how to divide that crew time between all these three parts. And we need what we're working now very close with Julie as well. So understanding we're trying to find the good investigators, international investigators, to perform real international or it's like experiments. So it's different between commercial and international or joint experiment. And when we have a commercial experiment understanding and somebody just orders something to perform, and we the issue is how to prioritize that thing. What is most important? Put something fundamental science or commercial science, or it could be the same. For example, some commercial science could be fundamental and very interesting, and so it's to find good solution. We need to work together. I mean, work together internationally. Using our international working group, ISF is working now, so that's understanding what is really valuable science or this internationally available science. And in this case, we're ready to pay the crew time for that, to pay the crew stations resources and supplies to do science like that. But what again is what we need to do, I think not only on the Russian Roscosmos, not others partners, we need from time to time to review, to make revision of all experiments, all space experiments. Sometimes experiments takes long time, more than 10 years, and from time to time we need to open our eyes, say, okay, maybe it's time to close this science, or to it's not most valuable, and we need to go forward to use crew time, our space station resources for something else.
Thank you. And Koichi-san, did you have a comment? And then up, and then up.
Oh, I have a quick comment. Yeah, I agree with Oleg and Julie mentioned about this joint research between U.S. and Russia. I think that kind of framework is very important. As Inessa said, it's the foundation of space exploration with the joint programs. And I think the rodent research and other human research type activities under the U.S.-Russian agreement is going very well. And it's great that Oleg worked on a U.S. lab and is participating American experiments. And that's why I think the key is to establish a framework for joint exploration, joint utilization. IGA and MOU for the systems operation, I think in the past 17 years we have established a matured agreement and operation, but when it comes to utilization, I think there's a room for advancement or enhancement. And 2 years ago, when the Japanese government decided to extend the space station participation up to 2024, we needed to establish a new framework of utilization with the United States under OP3. It's Open platform partnership program, and that's a non-space agency. It's a higher than a space agency level agreement between the State Department and the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs level, the government-to-government agreement to better or enhance the utilization of space station asset. It's similar to the U.S.-Russian joint exploration. So I think it's important to establish these kind of framework for utilization in order to better use the facility as well as data. And rodent research experiments, some of the samples offered from the Japanese researchers can be provided to the US researchers, some organs of mice, for example, and electrostatic furnace, levitation furnace facility that JAXA has in the Japanese module. Majority of the researchers are Japanese, but the opportunity is offered to the US scientists as well. So I think this concept of reciprocity of utilization is a key. And of course, we are talking about the deep space gateway and deep space transport, but I think transition of the focus of the space exploration from the ISS to the exploration is very important. We will continue the use of LEO, whether it's a ISS or some sort of different space station, but we will continue the utilization of LEO. So I think establishing a firm framework of utilization, not the operation, I think is a key to better use the asset and also the crew members' time. Like, joint, like a crew operation with the, joint research using the crew time for joint task list type activities, maybe an example. And some of the research areas that we can expand the sharing is like a microbacteria type data that is obtained from the operation of the space station. Those are the areas that we can expand the cooperation, I guess.
Thank you. Let me add to what Ines and Oleg are saying. I want to speculate a little bit what I see in what they try to proclaim. The point of sharing the data and sharing experience, they're really different. When we make treaties about data sharing, that's fine, but what's the problem? I can find the necessary magazine and read the data already obtained. Sharing experience, this is a different story. We are really competing, and competing not in the scientific area, but more in economy and politics. If we orient the joint protocol not on the country who is doing that kind of research, but on the problem itself, and create something like international scientific brigades from the most prominent people in that area, there will be much less competition and more sharing of knowledge and experience, and that will be more profitable. And that will destroy the barrier to whom this belongs. That will belong to the earth, to the science. And that means that that must be joint financing and joint solicitation of the international team working on the roadmap, on the particular place in the roadmap. That can prevent doubling. That can prevent coming back to what is already known by another country and reproducing of the same thing all the time. Second thing, we are speaking how to use the crew time, and it's absolutely true that the main currency is not money. The main currency is the crew time. But who is asking the astronauts how to maximize contribution? Where are the lessons learned of the international crews how to maximize the scientific impact of their work as a crew? After every flight, we are making interviews of Russian astronauts and asking them. And during recent years, I'm all the time listening to to the same idea. We could do more. We could do more. It's your fault that we are not doing more. And what is my answer? I can't do anything with all that by bureaucracy, because I'm withstanding the bureaucracy of my own country, and maybe it's not the worst in the world. I mean the bureaucracy. But still, it's more difficult than to deal with the international committee where people can understand me better. Just because they don't know me that much, and they can put pressure on myself in person. To sum up, I think that the future of maximizing any scientific effect in space is creating that international scientific brigades working on the internationally agreed problems. And that could maximize both resources and intellect. And second point, ask astronauts. They will tell you how to maximize the effects.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask our panelist, Vasily, to... Anessa wants to make a comment.
Let me just add to what Vadim said right now. Maybe not everybody understands that in our flight, in our life on International Station today, there are two completely separate and distinct life. One, it is regulation of life support and life, and the other is the work of our crew on national, international, and whatever research project. And see, we are flying almost 20 years already on the International Station. No problem in the first area, no problem. Because everybody, I'm coming back, there was common aim, common purpose. If we will not elaborate joint rules which will allow all of us fly International Station, we would not fly. That was absolutely certain. Therefore, there was performed very big work, and I was there at that time and I saw it, though I don't belong to that first group, because everything was thought over, decided, pointed down, and so on and so on. And now we don't have problem. Look, do you know, if anybody know here, that actually the life of all modules, Japanese, American, European, is supported and ensured by one module, which is service module. There is no air there if the service model will not give air. There will be no water, there will be no heat, and so on and so on. Everything is working. The joint medical system, in spite of the fact that all the medical system of different countries are different. And because there was created, that's what Vadim said, that was created the group, which is called, in Russian it is MMOP, it is medical group, international medical group, which work every week usually, but if something unusual happened, immediate, it is operator working group, and they decide what to do. Somebody is sick, somebody did something wrong, and so on and so on. And no problem, and no discussion, and no bureaucracy, nothing. Rules, and that's it. And we are flying 20 years. I would like to say, to use the chance and to say our thanks and appreciation to these people from all over the government of our station who works so successfully. Usually we blame them, but today I would like to say that appreciation. Now the very same station, now they're doing what they have to do. That's what they're flying. That's what they breathe for there and drink for there and use our finances and so on and so on. This is doing experiment or not experiment, observation and so on and so on. And now I want to say, and if Charlie Golden will be here, who was for many years the chief of the NASA administration here. Every time when we had this meeting, when I told this word, when I said, look guys, on international station, which we all created, we are guilty. We created this station to make our contact, to make our joint work even better than it was before, when only Mir or the other Salute station were flying. That was my work, my word from one to the other of our meeting here. Charlie will be there, and he said, Ines is right. We cannot work worse than previously, because there was just one country which ensured. Now we are get together, but we are working. It's still we are working worse than we worked before. That's I state, and I will continue to remind you.
Jeff, you've been holding that microphone for a while. Why don't you ask a question?
Yeah, Jeff Williams again. And this might be a question for Julie, Jennifer, and Oleg maybe. Last year I was a subject on the fluid shifts experiment, and that obviously is a very aggressive experiment and groundbreaking in some ways to include the international cooperation joint experiment kind of thing. And it was aggressive in terms of its data collection and whatnot. I thought it was a very good example to hold out. I don't know what the current status of it is, and I'm not asking that question specifically, but I would like to ask, how has fluid shifts informed this broader question of international cooperation, experiment design, getting the logistics on board, actually executing on board, and then the data sharing?
So fluid shifts was one of the largest undertakings for an internationally collaborative opportunity. Interestingly, I think there were components that were collaborated on in the proposal development phase. Multiple investigators were building their team, and then after multiple proposals were brought in, they go through, as Julie said, through a peer review, a relevancy review, and for those of you who aren't aware, it's addressing at this point what is considered our most critical risk, which is you're either going to know it as visual impairment intracranial pressure issue under VIP. It's kind of undergone a name change recently, which is the space-associated neuroocular syndrome, to give a little broader perspective on all of the things being characterized under this change. Ultimately, some of the proposals then were brought together. So there are different ways of this being achieved, and we know the pros and cons of it. We can't always avoid it because of how our different countries solicit work, fund our work. They call them kind of shotgun marriages. Like, you brought some aspects to the table that are going to address what we need. This other proposal is these aspects. Now we're going to ask you to go create a whole new team together. And then there was also the issue of driving toward the international collaboration and using both USOS as subjects as well as cosmonauts in this testing, and the use of Russian hardware, which goes back to sharing of facilities, because we knew we wanted to use the Chibis, the Russian lower body negative pressure device, as a potential intervention, like physiologically, not as a therapeutic in this case. So it has been very successful. It has reached a critical end number at this point. You have to power these studies to know if you can tell a difference or not. You don't want to get a false negative. And we've asked actually for additional subjects because we have some crew time available, speaking of the commodity with which we can trade with each other, understand importance and criticality, or where the crew time is going to be spent. So at this point, it's going to continue a little longer. We've requested additional N because at one point we did lose access to a couple pieces of hardware. So now you're dealing with, and Bonnie mentioned it before, with a very small N number and doing work in the operational field, like a field study as complex as it is. When you have certain dropouts, then you even have lower N numbers in certain aspects of your study that could have critical information. So we've gone back and given the utilization of station, asked for more N. It's worth the slightly extended time. And now we're negotiating, again, the use of Chibis because it is an important part of the study to be able to manipulate that fluid and say, does that change the dynamics we're seeing in the eye and the brain, which is the big question with that issue.
So maybe Vasily should go next.
Добрый день. I will speak in Russia. Пользуясь случаем, хотел поблагодарить Джулию и американских коллег за приглашение. Первый раз на таком мероприятии. По сказанному хотел бы согласиться. Тут много сейчас говорилось о бюрократической системе нашей.
I want to agree that we have obstacles in the bureaucratic system. I want to agree with the Japanese colleague that joint realization of the experiments will need to be standardized. It needs to be formalized somehow to make it easier. When talking with the US colleagues, we have started identifying some weak links in financing, in the mechanism, in the realization, in implementation of the experiments is what is difficult at this time. We have a great example on docking standards, document development. In order to dock with each other, we need to make sure we have common interfaces. We have to remove some bureaucratic issues by developing common interfaces. Also about the use of ISS, Alex said absolutely correctly that the ways of using ISS is a platform of further verification of technologies for further exploration by medical experiments included, and that is something that is a focus of common attention. Also fundamental studies as well. We have a lot and enough hardware on board. Scientists know what facilities we have available on ISS, but it is important to make the data more accessible onto how to use this hardware and the details of using and the data, so that other scientists will be aware. Maybe some formalization of this process will help. I believe we have something to work with here. That's all I had to say.
Dave, you've been awful quiet. I'd like to hear some more words from you on all of this matter, and then we'll get to the microphone that you've been holding there for a while.
Я тоже буду говорить по-русски, поэтому.
I will speak Russian as well.
Я согласен.
I agree with Vasily Savinkov that in order to effectively implement joint experiments on ISS, we have to develop some kind of common rules. The experience that I have, and I have been a co-president in fundamental biological experiments with NASA MIR program, and now the lead of Berlin program, where we have a lot of communication with the US colleagues. We've been thinking how the data is going to be used within the international community, and we have no problems there. Everything is clear when the rules are clear. When we don't have clear rules, understood formalization of how mechanism of cooperation, then it creates confusion. We have to write those rules. We have to formalize it, because effective research is not possible if we don't know how to use facilities of other partners. People have to extract what they are coming for from their work. People have to pursue their own experiments, but they have to know how to do it and which rules we have to use. The bureaucratic chaos is always an obstacle. For example, time of a crew member, that is very important. Why do you have to argue about it all the time? If the crew time is more important than the result of the research we are conducting, then why do we need that time of the cosmonaut? That's why I'm saying that the clear rules will need to be established. Julia was talking about rodent research. What a great program. Everybody wants to participate. We are very interested in this program. It is connected with BioM program with also participation of US cars, but we are not able to implement it fully because we do not have the rules of communication. And you see, we've been talking again about the crew time. Why do we have the crew time? The crew time is needed in order to get the results of the research, and this is what's missing. And I believe what Vasily Savinkov was saying was very important. Thank you.
I would like to add to what Volodya said now. That, because it is interesting when you look through the table of joint experiment or experiment which are going on board. There, you will not find identity, the same features in different experiments. That shows that there are no real rules, because if the rules are there, then the mistakes or just the good sides will be the same. Why I'm saying so? Because on board now station, we have 2 joint experiment Russian-American. Both programs are very big and absolutely new program. One is the bladder distribution, which you were talking, but about the second, you even didn't hear because it's going so smoothly that we don't have. That is our program together with American, with JSC, which is called the field test. This is absolutely new, very important program, which consists of many tests which are put in battery, which are performed immediately when the cosmonaut landed. Because we have decided both times that we will be not able to fly if we will not know in what states the cosmonaut came to this Luna, or I don't know, to Mars and so on. Because every country so much thought about the state of cosmonaut after flight that we don't allow them to walk, to do some work, and to do anything. As soon as they landed, we grabbed them, and then we brought them somewhere, and so on and so on. So there was developed this program, which is called field test. And because the landing on our station, occur only in Russia. So there were big difficulty, because it means that people from American side should go there, participate in landing, do all this battery of tests and so on and so on. It takes about an hour, immediate, when the cosmonaut or astronaut grabbed out of ship and presented for the battery of tests. No problem. Why? We have this because the program was organized and was written, and the rules were put down by 2 teams who worked still on Mir station. This is Milreshke lab and our lab. And no problem. We are doing very big work. We are meeting American cosmonauts. We present them, also meeting specialists who are doing. We are presenting our specialists to help, and so on and so on. And the program is going. And everybody told us that you would not do it because it is also time of cosmonaut who just came, who is tired, who is not in very good state, and nothing. Everything is going very, very well. So I'm coming back to what сказал Володя. There should be written very strict rules, the same strictness as medical program for station, as a life support program for station, and so on. That should be done.
It looks like we are out of time, and I think it means lunch is coming. So let's adjourn for lunch, and we can pick up in the afternoon, and there will be a delightful speaker during lunch. Jack Schmidt will be giving us a talk.
Enjoyed it?